The stagecoach didn't just stop. It died a shuddering death in a cloud of red Montana dust. Elara Vance gripped her carpetbag until her knuckles turned the color of old parchment. Through the grime-streaked window, Pine Ridge Station looked less like a town and more like a mistake. A huddle of weathered buildings clinging to the earth against a biting September wind. "End of the line, miss," the driver rasped. She was the last passenger. The others, sensible folk with families and clear futures, had disembarked miles ago. Elara smoothed her slate-gray wool dress, practical, severe, and entirely out of place, and stepped onto the creaking platform. In her bag lay a marriage contract and a silver locket, the only remnants of her life in Boston. "Miss Vance!" The voice was a low rumble, like stones shifting in a riverbed. She turned to find a man who looked as though he'd been carved from the landscape itself. Broad shoulders filled a worn flannel shirt, and his face was a map of the elements, weathered, lined, but anchored by eyes the startling blue of a winter sky. "Mr. Thorne?" she asked, keeping her chin high. "Silas," he corrected gently. "Folks call me Silas." He didn't smile, but his gaze wasn't unkind. It was measuring. "That bag all you brought?" "I sold the rest." He nodded, a sharp, efficient movement. "Wagon's this way. We've got a piece to travel before dark." The wagon was a sturdy utilitarian thing, but he had spread a clean quilt over the bench seat. As he helped her up, his grip was firm but careful, as if she were something fragile. Elara wanted to tell him she wasn't porcelain. She had scrubbed floors until her knees bled to pay for this ticket. She stayed silent. They rode through a silence vast enough to swallow cities. The town fell away, replaced by stands of lodgepole pine and mountains that scraped the belly of the clouds. "There's something I need to say," Elara said, the words scraping her throat. "About why I answered your advertisement." Silas kept his eyes on the road. "If it's about what the Boston doctors said, I already know. You were honest in your letters, Elara." Heat flooded her cheeks. "My womb sits wrong," she had written. "The physician says I am built poorly for childbearing. My fiancé left when he found out." "Then why?" she asked. "Your advertisement was clear. You wanted a family." "I've seen lightning strike a sound house," Silas said quietly. "And I've seen poorly built shacks stand through storms that leveled stone. Doctors know bodies, maybe. They don't know everything about what makes a home." He glanced at her. "I want voices in the house besides my own. I want to build something. Children, God willing. But that's not all of it." He pointed with his chin. "We're here." The cabin sat in a meadow backed by deep forest, solid and unpretentious. Smoke drifted from the chimney. It was built with care. The windows fitted snug, the porch boards true. This was the work of a man who did things once and did them right. Inside, it was sparse but spotless. A main room with a stone fireplace, a table, 2 chairs. "You'll take the bedroom?" Silas said, gesturing to a door. "I'll bunk in the main room until you're comfortable." It was a kindness she hadn't expected. Her former fiancé, Julian, had spoken of marriage rights and duties, never of comfort. "Thank you," she whispered. The wedding, 3 days later, was a transaction sealed with a handshake and a kiss that felt more like a promise of protection than passion. Reverend Pike married them in the small church in town, with the storekeeper's wife, Mrs. Henderson, and the local midwife, Maud, as witnesses. "He's a good man," Maud told Elara afterward, her dark eyes sharp. "Built that cabin board by board. We wondered if he'd ever take a wife." "What changed?" Elara asked. "Man gets tired of empty rooms," Maud said. "Gets to thinking about what lasts longer than himself." She patted Elara's arm. "You need anything. Woman things, baby things. You come see me." The sting of the implication was duller here. In Boston, it had been a sharp knife. Here, it was just a fact of life. Life at the cabin settled into a rhythm. Silas was a man of few words, but his actions spoke in volumes. He noticed she struggled with the heavy cast-iron skillet, so he silently sanded the handle to give her a better grip. He noticed she missed the sound of the city, so he carved her a wind chime from hollowed bones and hung it on the porch. In return, Elara learned to be a mountain wife. She learned that bread needed to rise longer in the cold air. She learned to shoot the heavy rifle Silas gave her, bruising her shoulder until she could hit a tin can at 50 paces. "You've got a good eye," Silas told her one afternoon, the winter snow beginning to drift down. He stood close behind her to correct her stance, his chest a warm wall against her back. Breathe out slow. Don't pull the trigger. Squeeze it. Like you're asking, not demanding. When she hit the target, his rare smile transformed his face, making him look 10 years younger. That night, a blizzard howled down from the peaks, burying the world in white. They were snowed in, the cabin a warm island in a frozen sea. "I made something for you," Silas said after supper. He brought out a rocking chair, the wood sanded to the texture of satin. "Finished it in the barn." Elara ran her hands over the arms. "It's beautiful. Silas, you treat me as if I'm precious." "You are." He looked at her across the lamplight. "You're my wife. Even if I can't give you what you want." He reached across the table, covering her hand with his broad, calloused one. "We're building a life, Elara, not a brood farm. If children come, they come. If not, we'll find another way to fill the silence." The discovery happened a week later. Elara was in the barn loft, searching for burlap. When she found the box, it was tucked away, under the eaves, covered in dust. Inside lay sketches, dozens of them, drawings of a cradle, detailed measurements, notes on spindle designs, carvings of wild roses. "I should have burned those." She jumped. Silas stood at the top of the ladder. "You drew these?" "During the war," he said, climbing up to sit beside her in the hay. "Kept me sane, planning a future. Thought I'd come home to one." "Sarah?" Elara asked. He had mentioned a former fiancé once, briefly. "She didn't wait. Married a banker while I was at Shiloh." He picked up a sketch. "But the design, I couldn't let it go. I cut the wood for it that first winter here. It's stacked under a tarp downstairs. Just couldn't bring myself to put it together for an empty room." Elara looked at the drawings, the love and hope captured in pencil strokes. "Build it," she said. "Elara, build it, Silas. Not for a child, for us. Because it's beautiful. Because you made it." She touched his face. "And because I'm ready to stop being afraid of empty rooms." That night, she didn't go to her bedroom. She went to his cot in the main room and then led him to the bed he had built. Their lovemaking wasn't the frantic, performative thing she had feared with Julian. It was slow, reverent, a conversation of skin and breath. "No regrets?" he asked later, holding her as the wind sang in the chimney. "None." The nausea started in November. At first, Elara blamed the preserved meat. Then she blamed the wood smoke. When her monthly course didn't come, she blamed the stress of winter. But when she retched violently into the snow one morning, Silas set down his axe. "We need to see Maud." "No," Elara said, panic rising. "It's just a sickness. The doctors said, doctors can be wrong." The trip to town was brutal through the drifts, but Maud confirmed it with a smile that crinkled her eyes. "You're carrying, Elara, strong heartbeat, defiant just like its mother." The ride home was silent, but it was a silence trembling with terrified joy. They finished the cradle together. Silas assembled the frame, and Elara sanded the spindles until they glowed. They placed it in the spare room, a monument to the impossible. But winter in Montana is a cruel season. In January, Elara woke to pain, a cramping vice that squeezed the breath from her lungs. She screamed for Silas. He carried her to the wagon, wrapped in every quilt they owned, but the blood was already soaking through. He drove the horses to near death getting to town, but by the time Dr. O'Rourke saw her, it was over. "I'm sorry," the doctor said, wiping his hands. "It was too early. Her body just couldn't hold it." Elara lay in the gray light of the doctor's spare room, feeling hollowed out. She had been right. The Boston doctors had been right. She was broken. When Silas came in, she turned her face to the wall. "I told you," she rasped. "I told you I was a bad investment." "Stop it." His voice was rough, shaking. He sat on the bed and pulled her into his arms, ignoring her stiffness. "You are not an investment. You are my wife. We lost a child, Elara. We lost it. Don't you dare shut me out of this grief." He cried then, great shuddering sobs against her neck, and that broke her. They wept together, mourning the hope that had been so briefly, vividly alive. Spring arrived with the smell of wet earth and a letter from Boston. Silas brought it from town, his face grim. "It's from Julian. Elara's hands shook as she opened it. "My dear Elara," it read. "My wife has passed. I realize now the mistake I made. I have consulted new specialists. There are treatments. I am coming to Pine Ridge to bring you home." "He's coming here," she whispered. "Let him come," Silas said, his voice dark. Julian arrived a week later, stepping off the stagecoach in a suit that cost more than Silas's farm. He looked at Elara, then at Silas, and sneered. "Elara, you look tired. This life doesn't suit you." "I am home, Julian. Home, in a shack, with a laborer?" Julian stepped closer. "I can give you the best doctors in Europe. We can fix you." "I am not broken," Elara said, her voice steel. "And I am not leaving." Julian's eyes narrowed. "We'll see. I've done some digging. This man's homestead claim, it's vulnerable. There was a 6-month period in 1882 where he was absent. Abandonment voids the claim." "He was tracking rustlers," Elara cried. "He was deputized." "Did he file the paperwork?" Julian smiled, a shark in the water. "I've filed a challenge. The hearing is next week. When he loses this land, Elara, you'll have nowhere to go but with me." The week that followed was a nightmare. They scrambled to find proof. Silas rode to every neighbor, every rancher he had helped. The courtroom was packed. Julian's lawyer, a slick man named Hatch, produced witnesses who swore the cabin had been empty, the land abandoned. "It's a technicality," Hatch argued. "The law requires continuous residence." Silas stood alone. He had refused a lawyer. "I served the territory," he told the judge. "I left to stop thieves who were stealing from these very people." "Noble," Hatch scoffed, "but legally irrelevant." Then the door banged open. Marshal Brady strode in, followed by a man Elara didn't know. "Your Honor," the marshal boomed, "I have sworn testimony here." He slapped a document on the bench. "Silas Thorne was acting as a deputy marshal under my direct command. Under Territorial Law Section 4, absence due to service of the peace protects all property rights." He turned to Julian. "And this man, the one claiming abandonment? I've got a witness who says Mr. Sterling paid him $50 to lie about the dates." The courtroom erupted. The judge banged his gavel, his face red. "Case dismissed, Mr. Sterling. You will remain in custody pending an inquiry into fraud." Elara looked at Julian, saw the shock shatter his arrogance. She didn't feel triumph. She just felt relief. She turned to Silas. He wasn't looking at Julian. He was looking at her. "It's ours," he said. "Truly ours." 2 years later, the sun was setting over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in gold and violet. On the porch of the expanded cabin, a small girl with Silas's eyes and Elara's stubborn chin tottered toward the edge of the steps. "Margaret," Elara called, laughing. "Come back here." Silas scooped the child up, swinging her onto his shoulders. Margaret shrieked with delight, grabbing his hair. "Letter came today," Silas said, handing Elara an envelope. "From Julian's sister." Elara opened it. Julian was in California, starting over. He had written an apology, of sorts. He admitted he had tried to buy what couldn't be bought. Elara tossed the letter into the fire. "All well?" Silas asked. "Perfect." She rested her hand on her stomach. The flutter there was strong, unmistakable. Another miracle. The doctors had said it was impossible. Maud had said it was unlikely. But the cradle in the spare room wasn't empty anymore. "The Pikes are coming for dinner Sunday," Elara said, leaning into her husband. "Good. I'll put the leaf in the table." They stood together, watching the twilight settle over the valley. They had fought the land, the law, and the ghosts of their pasts. They had built a home not out of stone or timber, but out of the stubborn refusal to let go of one another. Silas kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Elara." "I love you, Silas." The wind sang through the pines, no longer a lonely sound, but a lullaby. Thank you for reading this story of Elara and Silas. If this tale of resilience and romance touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to fight for a place to call home? Do you believe love is about finding someone perfect, or building something perfect together? Subscribe to the channel for more stories of the Wild West, where hope is as vast as the horizon. Leave a comment below with your thoughts. I read every single one.